Brody, Kendall, thank you so much for coming to the show. Let's just get right into it. You've both been incredibly successful in your lives at a very young age. You know, multimillionaire in your mid-20s. And what about this relationship between the two of you has either created a new level of success or kind of shifted how you look at success?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the best place for us to kind of start entry points there is like what's interesting about our relationship. Like, obviously, you know, Ken's in her late 20s now. I'm in my early 30s. We've obviously had previous relationships. I think for me, this is the first time being in a relationship with someone who is also a very successful entrepreneur. And there's been a lot of advantages and things that have really helped both of us grow. I think that are a really big contrast from like previous relationships that I've been in where that wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that we can unpack a ton of that. But being with someone who is also in the same role carries a ton of different benefits around just like having a shared understanding of what we go through. You know what I mean? I think that like so much of entrepreneurship, like the bigger and bigger you get, like the more lonely it gets. And like we all understand the weight that we sign up for in building businesses, and that doesn't take away from like the heaviness that that carries, but the loneliness is like the biggest thing that in my career I've really experienced, and in past relationship haven't really been able to share with anyone who can understand. And I think that like that's probably one of the biggest things that has stood out to me and really helped in our relationship is being able to like walk life with someone who like really does get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I would say, like, for me, I co-sign everything there. I definitely never had a partner where I feel like I could just hold it down because he has a clear understanding of the things that I experienced, to where, like, for me, there's definitely a benefit of, like, me being able to flow more in my day-to-day, like, getting to the end of the day and closing my laptop and knowing, like, if I had a hard day, I have a partner who can hold it down for me, who I can share what happened. You know, he is so knowledgeable where it's one of those things where he'll not only hold space for me, but also be able to kind of advise me on the thing without me getting, I think, egoic, because I really respect him and what he's walked through and what he's done in his own career path too, where in the past it's like, you don't get it. Like, don't give me that advice. You don't understand what I'm experiencing here. But here I actually turn to him a lot of the time and I'm like, hey, like, this is something I'm experiencing. And he has a level of shared understanding, but also I think just really holds it down and holds space and asks the hard questions too for me, where it's sometimes a mirror and sometimes challenging and frustrating. But
Yeah.
it also is something that I'm super grateful for. And I think I can, do the same for you as well too, where it's like if he's having a day too, I can kind of share ideas. And even both being in the content creation space and on social media, it's like, hey, what do you think of this hook or like this idea, where there's also this shared vision that we have together, but then we also have our own visions and we can support each other's visions independently too, which is really cool.
Yeah. When you were in previous relationships, could you feel that you were missing this? Or was it something that when you were in this relationship, you're like, wow, I didn't realize how incredible this could be. I didn't realize that I needed this.
I'll let you go.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for me, in previous relationships, it was like, okay, I had some pretty great partners who were like in the space to some degree. But what I will say is I didn't quite understand how good it can get. It wasn't like, oh, okay, maybe something is like missing. It's like, okay, this is good. But I think when we stepped into this relationship, it was like, whoa, I didn't even know this was possible. Like, I had that feeling where it was like, whoa, it can get this good. I didn't realize that this was something that was really even on the table. Like, I knew it could get good, but not to the point where I could feel this understood personally. I mean, that's how I felt when we first met.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, I think it's also a very different, like, it's a very different lens to look through for a guy and a girl. You know what I mean? And it's like in a previous relationship, it's like I was more in a situation of being a sole provider and and walking that path that like a lot of men do. And I don't think that it was like I don't think that I was ever necessarily like I'm missing this. I think it like I echo kind of a similar sentiment that Ken just put out of like I was like okay wearing that hat and being in that role, but I also had never really considered what it might be like for it to be different. I just thought that that's the way it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because that's how it is in most of society and in a lot of scenarios. And it was really interesting when Ken and I first met and we started dating. It was like I think one of the coolest things about it that like really was a testament to like the quality of our relationship and like what we were building towards was that we don't really need anything from each other in the sense of survival or providership or anything else. Like it's a relationship that doesn't have transactional pieces that are wrapped into what you're doing. It's like you know that we're here because we want to be. And I think that that's super beautiful.
That's amazing. How do you like if you coach men,
Yes.
right? And entrepreneurs, so men who are in a very similar space of like focusing a lot on their business and their relationships are maybe suffering because of it.
Yeah.
What do you tell them in that like how to create a relationship, how to attract a partner that's similar to Ken?
Yeah, well, and so I think that like here's one thing that I will say. I don't think that like I don't think for every entrepreneurial man an entrepreneurial partner is maybe what they want. You know what I mean? I think it comes like there are a lot of beautiful benefits that we talk about and there are also other real sacrifices that you make, you know what I mean? There's pros and cons to both sides of that like relationship dynamic. You know what I mean? And I think that the more important thing is like helping them understand what they really want out of a relationship beyond like dynamics and responsibilities and
Mhm.
roles.
Mhm.
And I think that really sits above all else. You know what I mean? Because there's absolutely a lot of like it, on paper a lot of challenges that come with both of us being very busy. There's sacrifices that we have to make. There's times and seasons that we're in where one or both of us is working an incredible amount and we might have to pull away from other areas. But I think when coaching men and kind of addressing the question that you asked, like the biggest thing is really getting them to a place where they understand themselves, understand their needs and how those need to be met, and showing up as the type of man that can attract that right type of person.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? To fit those.
Mhm.
But I don't look at it. I look at it more through the lens of the person and what they need and how that all fits in versus the dynamics or like life situation and career path of the other partner,
Mhm.
right? But because I do think that there's pros and cons to both.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
not for everybody. And do you see the men that you're working with? Are they more in relationship or are they more not in relationship? Just curious.
In most of them are in relationship.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? In my career, I've coached, at this point over 1,200 men. And I would say probably 50% of them were in like serious relationship or married and like already in family or starting family. I would say like another 25% were like dating somewhat serious, like dating someone somewhat
Yeah.
seriously. And then probably the other 25% probably like single men. Because I also started coaching at a very young age. I was 25. And so I was also coaching a lot of guys who were in their 20s and 30s. But then as I started to grow as a coach and also become a lot more competent as a business consultant and strategist, like I then started working with older men and also started tackling a lot of the challenges there. I
Mm.
think one important piece of context too is like I I have I have two kids from a previous relationship, and so I started a family and started building a business very young, which I think is what attracted a lot of men to me. Like there were not very many men in the online space at that time who were growing a brand, building a business, and also building a family at the age that I was, and I think that stood out a lot, and is also why I like ended up attracting and coaching a lot of older men because I could in addition to the younger men because I could understand the range of experience all across the spectrum.
Mhm. That's awesome. And I have the same question to you because I know you work with mainly female entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
How many of them are single versus in relationship? Just
Oh,
I'm curious
man.
about the data.
Yeah, well, I'm really grateful he mentioned more of like the dynamic side of things because I
Yeah.
will say, even just stepping into this relationship prior to, I had kind of, I don't want to say like given up on hope of finding another like entrepreneurial partner. I always thought I was going to have to be the breadwinner, or I was going to have to maybe date somebody who was like more of a cheerleader dynamic or something like that. Until I met Brody, and my mind was very quickly changed. But I think for a lot of women, it's actually kind of similar. A lot of the women I work with, I would say I work with a lot of married women who are actually the breadwinners. I work with a lot of women who are in long term relationships. And I would say probably like closer to 60% of the women I work with are single. And the reason being, I think it's because I work with a lot of younger women who are, 20 to 30, who are still really finding who they are as individuals. And I think one of the biggest challenges I see amongst women specifically is like trying to understand what they're really looking for in a man while they're also working on building their own business. And I work with a lot of women who are those high achieving women where I think they haven't really quite learned how they can prioritize a relationship while also building their business. And I think that's a story that a lot of people write that I work with, which I was really grateful when I met Brody, like meeting a man who could actually prioritize having a family, having a relationship. I was like really dumbfounded when I first met him and how much time he put in initially when I first met him. I was like, wow, he plays zero games. Like he right from the get-go was like, this is how I'm feeling. And, we had both come out of relationships not too long before that, to where we were both like, wow, okay, I think we're just both all in on this thing. And I think for a lot of women, that I work with specifically, because they are a little bit younger and they haven't quite found themselves or what they're looking for just yet, sometimes they look at, okay, I have this really high standard for like what I want in a man, but they themselves haven't quite held the standard for themselves to be able to look in the mirror and say, okay, I'm being the reflection of what I am really looking for in a relationship. They are still kind of, maybe anxiously attached to the business, or they are working really, really long hours where they haven't carved out the space to prioritize a relationship up until that point. And so I think a lot of the women I work with, there's so many different dynamics, but you do have some of the women who are like holding down the fort and they are the breadwinners. And I have multiple clients who have even retired their husbands. And then you have this really big range where I feel like there is a big paradigm shift also happening, because in the online space where I work, you see so many women now that are just absolutely ripping. Like they're starting to come up really quickly. They're starting to make a lot of money. And it's creating this paradigm shift from traditional role of, man being breadwinner or, them maybe leaning on that. And now it's them being able to create their own, financial stability. And so when I'm working with women, a lot of it's like, okay, I have the money, I have the finances. I'm really not looking for financial providership. So what I am looking for is emotional providership support, which for me personally, like Brody mentioned, like when we entered this relationship, we realized we kind of want for nothing other than to love one another, to have emotional safety, to have a level of providership that's outside of the realm of finances. And it's being able to meet a counterpart that wants to also prioritize those things, or at least finding what you want someone else to prioritize. And I find for a lot of the women I'm working with, because they are in their early 20s or mid 20s, they're still looking for that for themselves too.
Mm-hmm. How did the two of you meet?
You go.
No.
You want to tell the story? I hired him for a VIP day. And I had followed him on social media for a long time. I had known a lot of people who had done his coaching program. I actually had an ex who did his coaching program. And, just kind of knew who he was in the space. I went into the Content Factory and he was there, and I was doing an interview, and I was like, oh my gosh, who is this guy? Walked in and he like didn't hold the door for me at first. And he's like, oh, surely I didn't think that you were walking in here. And I walk in, I sit down to do my interview, and he recognized who I was, which I was super surprised that he knew who I was. And then we started following each other, and we're like responding to each other's stories on Instagram, like, love your marketing. Like, it was and I bought one of his courses. Yeah. And I was just consuming his course material, and I was just like, the information inside of it was awesome. And I was like, this guy is so great. Like he's an awesome guy. I didn't think much of it though. And then, he posted on his story that he was going to be doing a VIP day. And I was like, I'm so in. I wanted to, at the time I was looking at if I wanted to scale my coaching business or not. And he's someone who I really had looked up to after going through his course material. And we basically had our VIP day, and I wouldn't say the inception really happened on our VIP day. It was more so after the fact. But,
yeah.
but
but we spent two full days together, just kind of like talking about a ton of different stuff inside her business, and like we had a lot of fun with it. And it wasn't long after that like we started hanging out, and then we're kind of just inseparable after that once we did. But yeah, it was a really unexpected entry point to a relationship for both of us at a time where we like weren't really expecting it either.
No.
But yeah, I mean, we've been pretty much all in since really quickly after we met. Everything clicked super well for us.
Mm-hmm. How long ago was that?
Year and a half ago.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I coach a lot of people, and mostly women actually that I coach, and I think it's so important to connect with each other from a position that's not necessarily, hey, is this my person? Am I going to date them? Am I going to marry them? We put so much pressure on ourselves to have that conversation, to have that all known before we even know this person. And so, yeah, like just like when you used to meet people at work before, remote, you would show up authentically yourself, not afraid of being judged or what they would think of me. And then you realize, oh, I really like this person. I'm having a really good time. And so that's so fun. You guys just locked yourselves in a room for 2 days and then came out. You're like, that was not a normal VIP day.
Yeah. 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 You know, one thing that's really interesting to kind of like to pull on a thread that Ken was like talking about earlier is like, one thing that has been such an interesting learning experience for me being exposed to Ken and her community of women that she coaches is like, I think that Ken's archetype is probably one of the most challenged archetypes or segments of society in a dating context. Women who have been building businesses, who are financially independent. I think that they really struggle to find men that fit what they're looking for, and then especially because, for most of us, it's like people who are very ambitious and start young. Kendall and I both started our businesses basically at the beginning, right at the beginning of our adult life. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you sacrifice a lot of your 20s really building. And like I said earlier, for me, I did end up like, starting a family and going in that direction. But generally, most people who are ambitious, they sacrifice most of their 20s to build, right? And then you get into this place where for the women who have been doing so, they've made that sacrifice. They've put a lot of time and investment into that. And then they're kind of getting into their later 20s and they're like, shit, I really want to get this figured out. You know what I mean? Because women also have a clock that men don't really have as far as starting a family. You know what I mean? It's like if you are a female and you sacrifice your 20s to building a business, you kind of start really taking it seriously at 30. Like you do have that pressure of like knowing what is going to be there if your dream is to have a family and 2 kids and whatever. You know what I mean? And so it's like I have developed so much like empathy for women in that archetype because it's like I can't imagine being in that position because it is really challenging, and also because most men get real weird when like their chick is the breadwinner, or they're not used to that type of thing. A lot of men really struggle with being able to handle that. And I think that's like what a lot of like Kendall's clients have experienced.
Yeah, and even my girlfriends, like I have a lot of girlfriends who are doing like multiple 7 figures a year that are looking for their counterpart that are in their early 30s where they spent a lot of their time building a career. And I think for a lot of them, they almost feel like they're sometimes really intimidating or, don't necessarily know how to lean into more of like their feminine because they've been spending so much time being independent or been single for a prolonged period of time because they spent so much time building their business. Where I think one thing that, and I don't know if you can maybe attest to this, even when we met, I was like pretty open and just very much like looking, like I wasn't looking for a relationship, but I was like, I want to prioritize a relationship. Like I had always felt like a relationship would make me better. And I think that, a lot of women who are in my position are like, I don't know if I have time for that, or they're really looking for it, but then they're not necessarily aligning the actions with looking for a counterpart where they do want to prioritize the relationship. But yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of women and have a lot of friends who are really successful that definitely struggle because, they think that guys want like the cheerleader trad wife or whatever, and they're like not that at all.
Yeah.
And want that counterpart that can grow with them.
Yeah, I think the other challenge for them that's interesting to talk about too is like female entrepreneurs have to really move back and forth on the pendulum of like masculine and feminine, and in a way that like men don't have to like really swing that pendulum as much, right? But I think that also is what stands in the way for a lot of entrepreneurial women in being able to attract the counterpart that they want, is that like their business requires them in a lot of contexts to really be more in their masculine. And a lot of them end up in a place where they struggle to be able to turn that off. And, where most men, and especially if they're looking for a counterpart who is in a similar range of success to them, like most men do want a woman who can be in her feminine and be soft. And I think that one of the biggest eye-opening pieces in the beginning of our relationship was that I didn't understand how much Ken wanted to be able to just let go and be in her feminine. And I thought in the beginning it would be like that wouldn't be something that she wanted because this is like the life that she's building. She probably is just more of this archetyping, and I didn't understand how much they needed to swing the pendulum and like how much they really desired that and struggled with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Kendall has always done a really, really good job of that, which has lended itself to so much of the positive characteristics and outcomes in our relationship and the quality of life that we get to experience.
Yeah. I was excited to talk about the whole masculine feminine thing, because this is like, I mean, in dating and in relation, this is like the topic that everyone essentially uses to give them an excuse of why they're single, right? And so you did mention it. It's like, hey, yeah, women who are high performers, business owners, like doing the top of their game, like, yeah, they have this expectation of moving from a masculine and a feminine for the relationship. And you mentioned, men don't necessarily have that as much. And one thing I want to challenge, though, is that it does, at least from what I've perceived on social media, is that there are moments where you are definitely in the support role where and so like, I think there is that understanding of like, hey, for someone, in order to be in her masculine and her feminine, like, I got to understand, how do I be in my masculine and also in my feminine?
Yeah. And it's not to say that men don't ever have to be in a position where they need to soften, right? Like, and I think that like the primary challenge of most men and what creates trouble in their relationships is their inability to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the one EQ and the ability to emotionally regulate and be stable through it and get on that level is like are all skills that need to be developed for any man in any relationship. I think that like what I was speaking, the demand, like the frequency in which they like, I feel I have to swing the pendulum is far less than it is for Ken,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like when I'm supporting Ken, like when I'm supporting Ken in an emotional context, like I'm still mostly in like more of a masculine and supportive role, right? Of like helping her be able to hold weight that like might be overwhelming her at that time. You know what I mean? And that to me still feels pretty adjacent to everything that I normally do from an energetic perspective and how I navigate in my day-to-day life. But for Kendall, I think it's like there's more surrender that has to happen there, you know. Does that make sense? In the way that I'm viewing it.
Totally. I totally agree. And I think it's just important, right, for men to understand, hey, if you want a woman who like, she also gets to be in her masculine sometimes, and that means that you might not, like, might need to be the one who's supporting, right? Like there's that yin, that yang, that balance. And so I'm acknowledging you for being able to create that
well,
space.
And so I think the biggest thing to like, the biggest way that I frame it in my mind too is like when Kendall has to be in a state where she is that way because of the way that her life demands. Like for me, I just don't make it weird. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't say anything about me.
Totally.
Where it's like where I think a lot of men like start getting in their heads around what does that mean, and they get super fucking weird about power dynamics and like a whole bunch of just like stories that are not real. And it's like, dude, you just gotta let them be what they need to be at that time, and like not make it weird or not make it anything about you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's one thing that's really amazing about Brody. When I first met him, is like I say like women are like weather. Like 1 minute it's like a volcano, and then and it's even through regulation and like learning about your nervous system and all the things. It's like as women, like we're on a cycle month to month. There's so much that happens with our bodies. There's so much that happens with our hormones. I can be in rage and like I can be very my masculine, where there are also times where my masculine gets very like egoic, where I'll walk out and he is just so steadfast, where it almost like alchemizes my energy to where I like calm down. Like you came into my office yesterday and I was like a little riled up from something, and he's just sitting there and he was just like taking it all in, and I was just popping off. And I think just seeing his energy be like more still and very grounded, which I don't know if you want to assign that even like a gender role. It's just more like you're just very grounded in the sense that it almost just makes me calm down. And it's like I know that when I'm ready to like soften for myself, he's right there for me to just be like, okay, sometimes just like crawl into his lap and just like go over and give him a hug. And it pulls me back into, you know, who I really need to be as a nurturer too, because as a coach, as someone who's holding a lot of space all day for other women, it's like I've been able to kind of hold it down on my own. It's just better with you. Like it happens, the recalibration happens faster. I'm able to get back into my zone. I know if I need to be in my nurturing mode, I can be in my nurturing mode. It's not that you have to be reliant on you, but it's just really amazing to have a counterpart that makes it happen quicker for me. And yeah, I think it's like the grounded energy too. It's like a basin that just kind of holds the, like if you can imagine as like a basin for like a flame, like sometimes we're just like fiery and all over the place. And it doesn't matter. I think the most beautiful thing that I've really learned just about you is it literally does not matter what's going on in his life either. It's like he's always just down to like be the super grounded one, which is like I really, really appreciate. And I mean, you've done so much work on yourself, but I think for me personally, like being someone who does hold a lot of space for so many people all day, every day, it's like having a partner who I know I can rely on, and that's the case, you know, and he'll hold space, and it's just really, it's awesome.
And what shifts did you, or what work did you have to do in order to attract a man that could hold that space? And like, what do you tell, you know, your friends who are in similar positions? Like, what advice do you give?
You know, for me, there's like a couple of things, and I just think about conversations I had with my girlfriends. Like right before I met Brody, I had a conversation with one of my girlfriends, and I just knew that my partner was coming. I was like, I'm just really not worried about it. I'm not nervous. I feel like I'm gonna attract somebody who is a great counterpart for me. And I think just one, having the confidence in myself. Like I knew I had done so much work. I had wrote down what my non-negotiables were, what I was looking for. I wasn't attached to the process. I wasn't desperate to find my person. I was just very much like, I was like, I'm just going to be single this year. And if my person comes, amazing. I have a feeling that like it is coming, even if I don't necessarily quote unquote feel ready on paper. And I was just very detached from the process. I also think, you know, knowing the work that I do with women on a day-to-day basis, it requires me to be more grounded. It requires me to have a clear set of standards for myself, which I think in previous relationships, I didn't quite hold myself to. And before I met Brody, it was one of those things where I was like, I refuse to lower the standard for myself or settle for something that I didn't necessarily want. But I think sometimes, especially nowadays, you see, I don't know if the word egoic is the correct way to say it, but women kind of get, maybe a little egoic of like my bar and my standard is so high that it's like the guy can't mess up at all. And it's like, I was willing to meet whoever I met, you know, where they were at to some degree. And I think, you know, even when I met Brody, his life was very like different even than it is now. And, you know, on paper, like when I first met him, I was like, okay, I don't know if this is like everything I'm looking for, but it was like meeting who he was as a person. It wasn't like on paper where he was at necessarily in life, but it was the man that he was willing to step up and be, which he has just been so consistent in being the last year for me that I was like, that's actually what I meant when I was like, this is what I'm looking for. And I just think a lot of women, it's kind of like you go on social media and you see these like, oh, super high standards, like this is my bare minimum, like you have to pay for every dinner and do all these different things. And for me, it just really wasn't about that. It was like finding somebody who had emotional safety and could be there for me and was a rock and would be a rock, which of course also takes time to build. You know, it wasn't one of these things where I'm just gonna, it's like it's gonna happen right away. But I think detachment from the process is just the most important thing, and looking in the mirror and being, okay, this is who I am, this is what I want. I'm not gonna settle, but I'm also not gonna start, you know, getting desperate and clinging to things if I don't find that right away.
Mm-hmm. What's it been like Brody having 2 kids? What's that kind of role or that kind of opportunity?
Well, he, like when we first met, I think we didn't even really mean to get into these conversations, but I don't know if you were intentional or not about the questions you asked me, but
those were day 2 VIP day questions.
It literally, no, it's crazy because it literally was like, we started getting into values, and, you know, also we were just 2 like depthful people who like do the same, like we do the same work, you know, in a way. Him just for more so men, me for women. And so there was already like a level of depth that I think that we like wanted to share. And so, what was your question? Remind me.
Him having 2 children.
Oh, the kids. Yeah.
Into a role.
Yeah. So when we first met, he was asking me questions about like, you know, do you want more kids? Do you want marriage? And I was like, I definitely want marriage. That's for sure on the table for me. And I wasn't sure if he would, or if he would like want more kids. And I was like pretty indifferent at first, but I actually didn't even really want my own kids in all of my 20s. I was like, I can't imagine having my own kids. I want to work on my career and be super focused and whatever. And then just when I met him, I was like, man, he's so awesome. I can imagine that if he has children, like they're probably just an amazing extension of him. And I just didn't even think much of it after that. And then when I met his kids, I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like it was really, really cool and an awesome experience. And they are such an extension of who he is, like the most loving little boys.
Has it made you want your own kids?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we talked about it, which is crazy. Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. It's one of those things where I don't want to say I just didn't really have the perspective. Like it was one of those like I'm super selfish and I don't want inconveniences and I don't want to have to put my own things aside. But even being with the boys now, it's like, oh my gosh, at first I was like, I think I could have multiple kids. And we were like, okay, let's see where our life goes and where it takes us. But yeah, I mean, we're open, I guess. We've had the conversation around it.
Yeah.
What's it been like when you were dating Ken? What was the decision process that you went through before introducing her
to the kids? Yeah. So, I mean, I think like the most interesting part about where when I met Ken was that like I really had no idea like where or what I wanted in a relationship context. I had just come out of like nearly a decade long, very serious situation. And I was not sure at all about what was next there. And, it had been a long time since I had dated. And I also was now coming out of this with 2 kids. I was like, on on the surface, this is not what most women are looking for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And was like really reconciling that fact that like, okay, like if I want to be happy, I'm like kind of handcuffed as far as like how the cover of the book reads.
Yeah.
And so, I thought I would probably just end up in like pretty casual type settings for a while and then maybe, find someone who just like didn't want more kids and was open to it and whatever. You know what I mean? But when we met, I was just kind of like, because at first I told Ken, I was like, I'm probably not in a place for anything very serious right now. And after we were like feeling a lot of pull to each other, and she was like, well, I'm kind of in a place where that's the only thing that I'm looking for. And I was like, okay, totally respect that. Like maybe we don't engage, right?
Yeah, I just like didn't want to casually date.
Yeah.
And so then, I was like spending some time with it and there was like enough pull and enough draw there. And like, I've always had pretty strong intuition in a lot of ways. And like something told me to just be like, all right, just be like, fuck it. Right. Like, let's see what happens. That was literally what I told her. I was like, fuck it. Let's see.
It's literally what you said to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we dated for 6 months very seriously though before I ever introduced her. And then there was like an integration period that was like slow and very controlled and well thought out. And we also had to consider, the co-parenting dynamic with my ex and the mother of my children, which like we're super lucky for. Like we have a really nice cohesive setup there that's super chill and like we all get along super well. But those were all things that needed to be considered and really thought out and given time and patience to. But ultimately now, earlier this year, like we moved in together. And so we're integrated in like the maximum way at this point. But yeah, that was a very long journey that was really, really thought out and considered.
Yeah. How do you balance everything? I mean, how do you have multiple businesses, you have a massively successful business, 2 kids, like how do you make it all work?
Yeah, I mean, it takes intention and strategy around time and energy. I mean, that's the biggest thing. You know what I mean? It's like you have to be very methodical about where it's going because if not, you'll get sucked in any direction. You know what I mean? I mean, as a father, I have to commit serious time and focus and presence there, right? Like it's one thing to like say, okay, I'm spending time with them during this time, but and this goes for any relationship, right? But I think that this is where our relationship has more complexity than most do, and is actually more challenging. But it's like one, as far as how you're looking at the calendar and where you're spending the time, you have to be very strategic with that. But then you also have to maintain the energy to be able to actually be there, present in those times, and you have to stick to that, right? And you have to do the work to be able to to be able to be in a position where you have that level of control over your mind, your awareness, your energy, to have it all there, and there are seasons that we've struggled in ways where it's like we get to the end of the day and like there's just not that much left for each other. You know what I mean? And we've had to really figure out how to optimize around that and how to get more out of the little things and throughout the day and let that fuel where we need to go to feel like that connection is being maintained there.
Mm-hmm.
Because like for most couples it's like maybe one or two of them kind of go to work and they come home and then they do the kid thing and then they have their routine that they spend together. And it's like, sometimes for us, like the kids go to sleep and like we may have both have another couple hours of work that we have to do, and they're just like, and those are like sacrifices on both of our ends, and I think that that was like one thing that is nice about having an entrepreneurial partner is like, I was lucky that in my past relationship, my partner understood when I needed to do those things, and was like supportive, but they didn't like understand it at the level that Kendall does because she also has to do it, you know? But really the like shortest answer to your question is you have to be incredibly good at time and energy management. You have to be able to do the work to actually execute on the plan of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also just like a high level of communication. Like we are really intentional about going out and dating. And like something that we love doing together is going to festivals, or like we'll go and travel for a couple of days, where I feel like once we've been through a really, like, I would say more full season the last couple of months with
Mhm.
you rebuilding your coaching company, and there's just been a lot of things on our plate. And so it's like when we're home, we're working sometimes late at night when the boys go to bed, and then it's like we'll have our show, or like we have our thing that we do together where we're super intentional. Even during the day, like he'll come into my office, I'll walk out to the kitchen where he's working, and like we'll spend the like 3 minutes in between when our next Zoom meeting is just like talking to each other while we're like scarfing down a snack, and then go back and like be in our little bubbles. But I think being really intentional and communicating around it, like we have a shared calendar that
Mm.
like this has honestly been, I think, probably really instrumental. It's just like having the shared calendar where we know what's happening when, and like having date nights on there, check-ins in there, and making sure we're communicating if things are moving or getting changed.
Yeah. So I'm this is one of the last questions. I'm curious, like, what becomes possible for you and your businesses and your relationships and your family because you met each other. Like, I really want people who listen to this podcast, whether they're in a single or they're in a relationship, I want them to understand that, hey, there is a life that you may not have thought possible. And it might, like, you could be in it right now. You're building a business or you're dating and you think you know what it's going to look like. But I mean, for the both of you, you had a lot of evidence of things working really well for the most part, from like outside looking in at least. And I'm curious, what has this relationship allowed for you both to create that you never thought possible?
So I think for me, and I mean, it's for me specifically, and I think it applies generally across the board. It's like when you look at it in the context of like being in a relationship where things are not going well, like most people know exactly what it's like when they're like going through a relationship struggle, right? Like everything is hard, right? Everything else is hard. Showing up in the way that you need to at work, in other relationships, going to the gym, like doing anything is hard when the stress of like the relationship is in crisis mode is going on, right? And everybody knows that feeling, right? And so I think that everybody can wrap their mind around, okay, what does it feel like to have a relationship that is not going well, and how does that take away, right? And then unfortunately what I think most people like default to after they go through something like that is okay, well, I would be better off just on my own, right? And you would be better than you being on your own. You would be better than being in a relationship that is unsatisfactory.
Mm-hmm.
But what I don't think that most people understand is how much more of themselves that they can be when they are in a truly great and healthy relationship. You find new levels of energy and new levels of creativity and new levels of yourself that you really didn't see possible and that like you could never experience on your own. I mean, humans are wired for companionship. It is part of how we are meant to exist. And you will always be more in a great relationship than you will be on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I co-sign that. I think the biggest thing for me is there were so many suppressed parts of myself that I didn't recognize were suppressed until I had somebody who was really strong and steadfast, even like reflect that back to me of like, hey, you're just safe to fully be yourself. And now I get to see that in my work. I think it's same for you, like watching you grow so much this last year. It's just like really being goofy and silly with someone. Like I'm weird. Like I'm weird and like he knows this. But like having a place where I can just be the most expressed version of myself and not carrying that suppression or like keeping myself small. I think one of the most beautiful things that I've gotten out of being in our relationship specifically is being able to be my weird self, be quirky, and then that translating to being more expressed and open in my friendships and with my girlfriends, with my clients, and just having that example. And who knows like what we'll do together in the future. I feel like for us it's one of those things where having each other, like anything really is possible, which is really cool and a cool feeling to have.
Do you have a shared vision, or like what do you guys
Oh my gosh.
see possible?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that we share. You know what I mean? And I think that, like, obviously, like, we're not years and years and years into this thing yet, but we've talked a lot about, like, what the future looks like and what we may be able to do together, you know? And I think that, like, we both have our own vision and goals of where we want things to go. I think that there's also a lot of things that we talk about of what would it like to do things together. You know what I mean? And you know, we have had a period of time now of like us working together in some capacity. There are things that like I've come on to help with at Kendall's business, and you know, so we have some experience of that. But I think you know we're still figuring that out in a lot of ways, right? But I think that there are definitely dreams and a vision that we look at of doing a ton, like building a ton of things together versus building them side by side. And it might end up being some version of both, you know what I mean? But it right now it's like we have our things that we're doing, and we're also really good right now about just like loving where we're at and like navigating through those things day by day, and enjoying that. It's like I think you know because both of us, it's not necessarily the situation we thought we were going to end up in, you know, that like I don't think that Kendall thought that she was going to like find her person and someone that had 2 kids when she was
Totally.
this age. You know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
and so it's like
Totally.
any vision that we may have had like is either off the table or like previously before we met each other is either
Yeah.
off the table or changing.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that there's still a lot about that we're figuring out. But I also think that it's like, look, I think that having a vision of like what you want and like where you want the relationship to go and those things is all great. But ultimately, like what makes the relationship great and what opens up any possibility in the future is like being here in the moment and loving it now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that we do a really good job of trying to focus on that versus like, okay, what's it going to look like at this time and this time and this time? Like we're here now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have one more question, and I want to ask each of you this because you are uniquely positioned as a female business coach, a male business coach. Like, what would you tell a young man who's trying to figure out his business and also relationships, or a woman who's trying to figure out her business and relationships and trying to make them both work, or if that's even possible? What would you tell that person?
I mean, I think for me, what it boils down to, and I think this is more representative of my own journey, my own experience. Like entrepreneurship is a path of personal development. It's like personal development on crack. And so I think for me, like I, in a way, almost used my business as a mirror for myself for personal growth and personal development, to where as I developed through my business, I also feel like I developed as a woman, which made it a lot easier for me in a relationship context to understand the standards that I had and what I wanted, because I had grown so much. And also in serving other people, I had to step into almost more of like a leadership role myself. And so I think for women who are out there that are building their business, it's understanding that the business can be a vehicle and a mechanism to help you grow personally, and also that you can have both of those things and you can carve out and create the space. And in fact, I think it also comes into a capacity aspect where you actually can increase capacity by being able to have both the relationship and focus on the business. Whereas a lot of people think they need to focus on the business and then they can have the relationship. I think in having a relationship, it almost pushes the capacity that you have to love, to nurture, to build to spend your time being more productive in the business, because you also have something that you're pouring into that's not just the business. I know for myself and for a lot of women I work with, it's really easy for them to just dive headfirst into focusing on building something for themselves, focusing on building a career path. And it pulls parts of their personality away. It pulls opportunity away to really explore aspects of themselves. And I feel like even in our relationship, I've had the opportunity to do that. And I think more women who take the opportunity to meet new people, whether it be platonic or whether it be trying to look for a partner or looking for partnership, it allows them to express themselves more and find more of who they want to be, both inside and outside of their business.
How about you, Brody?
Yeah, I think for me, and like in my own personal experience and in the way that like I've coached and talked about dating and like finding or attracting a partner with all of the men that I've worked with, it's like really my core philosophy that sits around everything is the same type of thing of like, look, personal development and focus on yourself is what builds everything that you want. You know what I mean? I don't care if it's a business context. I don't care if it's a relationship context or finding the right person. It's like, if you just put your focus there in learning how to show up, how to manage your time, your energy, your emotions, how to emotionally regulate, how to be present, how to communicate. Like if you just focus on all of these core skills that really matter, like I truly believe that everything else will kind of unfold the way that it needs to, you know? And I think that you know, men or women put so much pressure on the actual strategy of like finding the person and like going on X number of dates and all of these things. And it's just like, you know, a lot of, and you may be able to tell me, but a lot of dating coaches, you know, they are talking about like, you need to get out there and you need to do that. Right.
Mhm.
And it's like, I think for most people, like they would be getting out there and they would be doing those things on their own if they were like truly secure in themselves and had done the work.
Mhm.
I don't think that like running into the right type of person or ending up in social circles where you find the right type of person is all that hard when you've like done the work because you're confident, you are more extroverted, you're down to get out and be around new people and strangers. And like, I think that if you're in a place where you're like that, like you'll find good opportunities and good people that, you know, might be the right chance there.
Yeah.
I think that like forcing it into too much strategy and structure when you're not in a place to be able to even hold what the relationship requires, I think that that's where people fail. And then it reinforces a negative feedback loop around their self-image and what that means in a dating context and how they view dating in general.
Yeah. 90% of my coaching is ways of being and emotional intelligence. Like
Yeah.
10% is like, hey, you're already doing, I guarantee you're doing everything you need to do. Like as long as you're leaving your house, you're good. Right.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
like-
If you're not leaving your house, well, then you know why you're not dating. Right. Let's start there. But yeah, it's all about, it's not what you're doing. It's about who's showing up, right? Like what version of you are showing up to these spaces? Are you open for it? Are you excited about it? Do you look approachable? Do people want to be in relationship with you? And, you know, you don't need to do anything differently, right? We do enough, especially high performers, high achievers. It's not about doing, it's about who you're being. And, you know, the both of you, I think you've really mastered who you get to be for each other, who you get to be for your business, and then going into all of the doing, which I know there's a lot of as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Totally.
But I just want to thank you both so much for coming. It was so great to talk to you, and I hope a lot of people found inspiration from the two of you. And is there any way that people could follow you, or how should they find you if they want to find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, just my full name, Kendall Strample.
Yeah,
Cool.
same. Just at Brody Kern on Instagram.
There you go.
I'm always available to help for people who are looking for help in what they need. It's like it's funny, every time I finish a podcast, I mean, I've done hundreds of them at this point and I never plug anything, but the one thing that I always do leave it with is like, dude, like my DMs are always open for like the man who's struggling with anything. You know, I've been through so much in my life and I've really built a brand and built a life and career around sharing my struggles and experiences. And it's like, every time someone's like, I heard this, and I mean, even you've probably experienced it in the number of people that have DM'd me that I seemingly don't know and tell me things that they're like, I haven't told anyone this. It's like, it's a really beautiful experience. And so that's kind of how I finish everything. It's like, there's an open door policy here if you're struggling.
We'll leave it right there. Awesome. Thank
Cool.
you.